I am Hercule Poirot. Welcome to my new mystery story.
It was on a bitterly cold November evening that the chapel at Linton Abbey became the stage for a most peculiar tragedy. The chapel, used now more for sentiment than devotion, was lit by scores of taper candles that flickered against the stone walls, casting shadows like trembling phantoms across the ancient pews. The occasion was the unveiling of a medieval reliquary recently restored at no small expense by Lady Agatha Linton, a patroness of the arts and the last formidable matriarch of her line. A select gathering had been invited: scholars, collectors, patrons, and a smattering of the fashionable world, those who would appreciate the solemnity of the moment, and those who merely wished to be seen attending it. The reliquary itself, said to contain fragments of parchment linked to a 15th century martyr, rested on a velvet-lined pedestal beneath the altar. Lady Agatha, robed in dark velvet and wearing a necklace of jet, presided over the ceremony with a kind of imperious composure that allowed no rival in the room. But beneath the polished surface of cultured discourse, one could sense something unsettled. There were sharp glances exchanged, hurried whispers in corners, and more than one guest seemed distracted from the solemn relic to the living tensions among the company. When the final candle was lit, silence fell like a cloak. The air smelled of wax and stone dust. A bell tolled in the abbey tower. Lady Agatha raised her hand to speak, and at that moment a scream rang out from the shadows behind the transept. All eyes turned, and there, illuminated by the wavering candlelight, lay the body of Edward Stanhope, an antiquarian of some notoriety, sprawled across the flagstones. His white silk scarf had been twisted tight around his throat, the knot cruelly embedded beneath his jaw. Gasps of horror broke the stillness. A chair clattered to the floor. One of the guests, a young woman in pale blue, pressed her hand to her lips as if to suppress another scream. Lady Agatha's composure faltered for the first time in years. Her jeweled hand trembled as she clutched at her necklace. And in that instant, the reliquary, the object of all the evening's reverence, was no longer the center of attention. The murder had stolen the sanctity of the night. The chapel doors were barred at once. No one could enter or leave. Inspector Graves of the county police, who happened to be among the guests by virtue of his friendship with Lady Agatha's nephew, took immediate command, his booming voice cutting through the confusion. "No one is to leave this place. We are all witnesses, and perhaps suspects." Yet among the flickering lights and frightened faces, a quiet murmur could be heard, one that would soon grow into certainty. The matter required more than the heavy tread of the police. For this was no common crime. This was a puzzle of the human mind, woven with secrecy and deception. And though none knew it yet, fate had already set its course toward the little Belgian detective with the waxed mustaches, Hercule Poirot, who, by a curious coincidence, was at that very hour lodging not 3 miles away at the countryside manor of an old friend. The first panic ebbed to a taut stillness as Inspector Graves posted a constable at the doors and drew the guests toward the nave. Candle flames snapped, shadows slid over the stone. Edward Stanhope lay in the transept, the white silk scarf hauled tight. On the altar, the reliquary glimmered on velvet, its lid not quite true. Lady Agatha, composed yet pale, stood with the jet beads wound about her fingers. "We shall keep our heads," she said. "Inspector, take the names and movements. The reliquary is not to be touched." Graves nodded. He counted the company into a semicircle. Julian Linton, the nephew, avoided the body. Miss Clara Whitby, the scholar in blue, held a notebook like a talisman. Sir Roderick Vale watched like a man at an auction. Dr. Miriam Havers, the conservator, stood neat and self-possessed. Mrs. Elspeth Crowe, the organist, hovered near the pews. Mr. Penfold, the verger, wrung his hands. "Movements," Graves said. "Brief and exact." Julian spoke first. "I greeted donors by the font. There was a draught. Penfold fetched a taper. My aunt raised her hand to speak. The bell tolled, and the scream came from the transept. I ran with Sir Roderick. Sir Roderick inclined his head. I followed because no one else moved. I did not touch Stanhope. "You have quarrelled," Graves said. "At sales," Sir Roderick replied. "Words, not ropes." Miss Whitby's words tumbled. I had stepped nearer the altar to read the Latin on the base. I dropped my pencil at the scream. I froze. Dr. Havers said, "North aisle, examining candlestands. Mr. Stanhope passed me before the ceremony." He looked grey. His scarf was loose then. "Unwell?" Graves asked. "Breathless," she said. "Preoccupied." Penfold cleared his throat. "At the west door with the bolt, sir. It sticks. I heard a scraping like a chair on stone. Then the scream." He glanced at the altar. "Beg pardon. The velvet corners tucked wrong, as if a hand slid under." Graves looked from the rail without touching. The crystal lid sat hair-breadth ajar. The velvet showed a faint nap pressed the wrong way. Along the transept rail, one taper was shorter than its fellows, guttering into a pale dish. Lady Agatha's voice carried, soft and hard. "Mr. Stanhope threatened us with a letter. Lies about the parchment's history. He meant an outrage during my remarks. I refused his terms." Julian coloured. "He tried to shake us. I told him we would not be bullied." Sir Roderick said dryly, "Stanhope liked to call objects false. This morning he wrote that my French chalice is modern. If he is right, I am poorer than I prefer." Mrs. Crowe lifted her veil. "He asked me if the organ loft is locked. I said yes." Graves crouched by the body. The silk knot lay under the jaw, drawn from behind and to the right. There were no marks of violent struggle. On the edge of the scarf, a smear caught the light. "Inspector," Dr. Havers said, "the mount is secured with 2 pins. One is not fully seated. A clumsy hand may do it, or a careful hand wishing to suggest clumsiness." "No one approaches altar or body," Graves said. "Remain in the nave. Penfold, blankets for the ladies and a brazier. Constable, send to Linton Lodge for additional men." Time steadied the room. Fear settled into recollection. When Graves asked again, facts rose. Julian admitted Stanhope had cornered him in the porch with a sealed envelope. He said it held proof of fraud and that he would open it at the height of my aunt's speech unless we saw sense. I told him to do his worst. Miss Whitby confessed 2 conflicting dates in her notes and that Stanhope had noticed. "He liked to make me feel provincial," she said. Penfold muttered that a sacristy key had gone missing last week and returned this morning to its nail. My fault, likely. Mrs. Crowe said she had heard a board creak above during rehearsal, though no one should have been in the loft. Sir Roderick observed that Stanhope made consequences out of insinuations. He left other men to tidy what he had dirtied. Graves wrote without comment, yet his gaze returned to the shortened taper and the smear on silk, and to the reliquary's faint, offended tilt, as if the chapel itself knew that small things put slightly wrong announce a mind at work. At length, Lady Agatha said, not as a request but conclusion, "Inspector, you will send for Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He is at Linton Lodge. 3 miles. Graves' mouth set, then eased. "Well, we shall have his counsel before these candles burn down." Outside, the November wind pressed the stone. Within, the guests made inventories of grievance and fear. Overhead, a board whispered, as if remembering a recent footfall. In the transept, Edward Stanhope lay still, the scarf's sheen answering the tremor of the guttering flame, while the reliquary seemed to wait like a lady displaced half an inch from her throne, patient for the hand that would set all to rights. The message was dispatched, and in less than an hour, the sound of wheels on gravel echoed through the abbey grounds. The company, restless and subdued, looked toward the heavy doors as they opened to admit a small, immaculate figure. Hercule Poirot stepped forward, the chill night air clinging to his coat, his moustaches precise and gleaming as if immune to the damp. He removed his gloves delicately, bowing to Lady Agatha with a grave courtesy before turning his gaze upon the room. His eyes, small and bright, seemed to linger upon every detail, the uneven taper, the reliquary lid not quite flush, the anxious shuffle of the suspect's shoes. "Messieurs, mesdames," he said softly, "I regret that I intrude upon an evening of reverence and culture. Yet already I perceive it has become an evening of something darker. It is well. Order must be restored." His accent, clipped and deliberate, carried easily in the vaulted chamber. Inspector Graves offered a brusque account, explaining the positions and statements gathered thus far. Poirot listened without interruption, his head inclined, fingertips pressed together. He asked only one question. The scarf. Was it his own? "It was," Graves said. "Witnesses recall him wearing it." Poirot moved toward the body, kneeling with a fastidious air, careful not to let his cuff brush the flagstones. He studied the knot, the angle, the smear faint against the fabric. His nose twitched as though scenting something not yet spoken. Rising, he stepped back, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. "He is strangled from behind, yes? Yet see, the knot lies beneath the jaw, pulled tight with an exactitude, not the clumsy fury of impulse. This was arranged." He crossed to the reliquary, pausing before it as if greeting an adversary. The velvet is disturbed. Someone reached beneath. But was it to touch the relic, or only to give the impression? He adjusted the lid a fraction, his eyebrows rising. And always the detail, one taper shorter. Flames, they betray impatience, n'est-ce pas? Someone needed darkness more quickly than the others would permit. The guests stirred uneasily. Lady Agatha, who had been still as carved stone, said, "Monsieur Poirot, you must discover which of these people has dared to profane this house." Poirot turned, his gaze alighting on each face. "Profane, yes, perhaps. But remember, madam, murder is not the work of the stranger outside. Here, within this circle, one mind has contrived the act, and already that mind reveals itself." He requested to hear each statement anew, insisting that words be repeated in his presence. Julian, shifting uncomfortably, repeated his account of Stanhope's threat. Poirot interrupted gently. "You say he thrust the envelope upon you. Did you open it?" "No, I left it with my coat in the porch." "Then we must see this envelope if it still exists." Poirot directed Graves to fetch it at once. Miss Whitby trembled slightly as she recounted her notes and the pencil she had dropped. Poirot bent toward her. "Mademoiselle, you are conscientious, yes? To note every small Latin word, yet you drop your pencil at the moment of the scream. Tell me, when you stooped, what did you see? Feet, shoes, a hem of a garment, perhaps?" She hesitated. I thought I saw someone pass quickly between the pews, but in the confusion—" "Non, Poirot said with firmness. "You saw it. To deny is to deceive yourself. We shall return to it." Dr. Havers repeated her observation of the loosened scarf earlier in the evening. Poirot's moustaches twitched. "It is most curious. A scarf loose, then tight. Life, untidy, death, precise. We must ask, who benefits from so neat a transformation?" Sir Roderick gave his version with a dry impatience. Poirot listened with half-closed eyes. "Monsieur, you pride yourself on discernment of authenticity, yet you followed Stanhope to the body with great eagerness. Tell me, did you kneel, did you touch, even to assure yourself?" "I did not," Sir Roderick snapped. "I am not so foolish as to tamper." Mrs. Crowe admitted once more that Stanhope had asked about the loft. Poirot's gaze flickered upward. "Locked, you say? Yet a board creaked. Tell me, madame, who else had a key?" "Only Penfold," she said faintly. The verger flushed. "Returned this morning, I swear it, sir." Poirot inclined his head, satisfied for the moment. Graves returned with the envelope, still sealed. Poirot took it delicately, holding it to the candlelight. A paper within, but not thick. Shall we open? Yes, for the truth waits. The seal cracked. Inside lay a single sheet with a typed assertion that the parchment in the reliquary was forged, copied from a 19th century tract and aged by chemical means. At the bottom, Stanhope had scrawled, "Exposed tonight unless concession made." The murmur rose among the company. Lady Agatha's face grew cold. Lies. Slanders. "Perhaps," Poirot said gently. "Yet see, it is motive enough. To protect one's honor, one's reputation, one's fortune. Motive lies all around us, but opportunity, that is the rarer jewel." He returned the paper to Graves. The hand that killed knew this threat, but also the hand knew the chapel. The scarf was drawn where the light was uncertain, the knot made beneath the jaw, the reliquary disturbed to mislead. My friends, such order is not of chance. The candles guttered as the night wind pressed through cracks in the stone. Poirot drew himself upright, folding his hands. "I shall speak with each of you again, not here in the nave, but in quieter corners. From contradiction, from hesitation, from the psychology of each, the truth will emerge. Inspector, I beg you, let none depart." The suspects shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking toward the barred door. Poirot looked around once more, the gleam of satisfaction in his expression faint but undeniable. "Yes," he murmured, almost to himself. "Already the little grey cells stir. The chapel, the candle, the scarf, they whisper to me, and presently they shall speak aloud." The guests were shepherded into smaller groups while Poirot arranged for interviews in the vestry, a chamber whose narrow windows admitted only a pale smear of moonlight. A single lamp on the table cast sharp pools of brightness, throwing each suspect's face into relief. Inspector Graves stood at the door, arms folded, while Lady Agatha remained in the chapel, her presence looming in the minds of all. Poirot began with Julian, whose nervous energy betrayed itself in restless fingers tapping the arm of the chair. "You are devoted to your aunt, monsieur," Poirot said with a quiet certainty. "Yet this man, Stanhope, he threatened her reputation, her very enterprise. You, the heir, had much to lose also. Tell me, what would you not do to prevent his words from reaching the company?" Julian swallowed, color rising in his cheeks. "I was angry, yes, furious. But I am no killer. He showed me that letter, and I told him to do his worst because I believed no one would take him seriously. Everyone knew Stanhope thrived on scandal." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze fixed. "Anger, it is a dangerous thing when mixed with pride. But anger leaves marks, clumsy knots, blows struck in rage. This crime, it is too calm, too arranged. You, mon cher, you are not calm, you are impulsive, and so for now, I set you aside." Relief flickered in Julian's eyes, though the inspector's frown deepened. Poirot dismissed him and called for Miss Whitby. She entered with her notebook clutched tight, her pale blue gown brushing the floor. Her eyes darted nervously about the vestry. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began gently, "you are a scholar. You live by observation. You dropped your pencil. You stooped, and you saw. Do not be afraid to speak. Truth is like the light of the candle. It flickers, but endures." She hesitated, then whispered, "I saw shoes. Polished, dark. They passed swiftly down the side aisle. I thought at first it must have been Mr. Stanhope himself, but the scream came a heartbeat later. Polished, dark. Many men here wear such shoes." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "But your certainty. It is useful. You are sure it was not a woman's step?" "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. A man, moving quickly, with purpose." He thanked her, sending her back to the nave. Next came Sir Roderick, entering with a stiff bow, his manner defensive. Poirot watched him carefully, his fingers steepled. "You are a collector, monsieur, and Stanhope made claims against you. A forged chalice, perhaps, a humiliation public and costly. Was that not motive enough? Sir Roderick's eyes narrowed. Stanhope's word means nothing. I intended to sue him for libel. That is a gentleman's recourse, not strangulation in the dark. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Yet you followed at once to the body. Eagerness, yes. Did you fear something? I feared my name entangled in his lies. I wished only to see what mischief he had contrived. Poirot tilted his head. You are precise, meticulous, like this crime. Yet there is one difficulty. Such precision in violence, it requires a hand steady but not rushed. Did you have the composure, the calm? Perhaps. Perhaps too much. The conservator, Dr. Havers, followed. Her neatness, her measured words, drew Poirot's close attention. You remarked that his scarf was loose earlier. You noticed small details. You are methodical. Tell me, do you value accuracy above all? I do, she said firmly. I preserve history. I despise the way Stanhope twisted facts for scandal. He ruined colleagues with innuendo. He wanted to ruin me too, I think. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And so you, madame, had motive. Yet you also had the knowledge of the reliquary, of its mount and pins. You could disturb it convincingly. But would you? To kill is to destroy order, and you, I think, love order too much. Her lips pressed tight, but she gave no reply. Poirot allowed her to withdraw. Mrs. Crowe entered next, her veil trembling with her hands. He asked me about the loft, she said at once, but I swear I told him nothing of use. Poirot inclined his head. And yet the creak above, it troubles me. You play the organ, yes? You know every sound. If someone climbed, you would know the step was not your own. Tears filled her eyes. I heard it, but I was afraid to say more. I thought perhaps it was only the wind. Poirot offered a handkerchief, immaculate and folded. Non, madame. Fear is natural, but fear conceals truth, and truth must be free. At last Penfold, the verger, shuffled in, wringing his hands. The key, sir. It went missing, but it came back. I thought it mislaid. Ah, monsieur, Poirot said softly. Nothing is mislaid. It is taken, it is returned. A key is a promise, a trust. Broken once, it whispers of betrayal. Who knew it was missing? I told Dr. Havers, and Sir Roderick too. They laughed it off. Poirot's brows rose. So, two knew. One may have used. He tapped his chin. But still, there is something not yet clear. A scarf drawn tight, a candle shortened, a reliquary disturbed. They form a pattern. The pattern tells of intent, not passion. And intent, it belongs to the mind most disciplined. When all had departed, Poirot remained alone with Graves in the vestry. He tapped the table gently. Inspector, observe. Each has motive, each has opportunity, but one among them has the mind for order, for detail. Already the tapestry begins to weave itself. The challenge is this, to find the thread that, when pulled, reveals all. Graves grunted. You've ideas already. Poirot smiled faintly. Ideas, yes. Proof, not yet. But the proof, it waits within these walls. In the morning I shall look upon the reliquary, upon the loft, upon the scarf, and then, mon ami, we shall see who feared the truth most of all. The lamp sputtered. The vestry fell into silence. Beyond the door, the suspects whispered among themselves, bound together by fear, by guilt, and by the knowledge that one among them had killed. And in Poirot's mind, the little grey cells stirred restlessly, arranging the pieces with the inexorable logic of order restored. The dawn broke grey and reluctant over Linton Abbey, the mist clinging low against the stone like a shroud that would not be lifted. The chapel, sealed through the night under constabulary watch, felt colder still when Poirot returned to it, with Inspector Graves at his side. The candles of the previous evening had long since guttered out, leaving only the hardened stubs, and the reliquary sat upon its velvet as though awaiting judgment. Poirot moved with measured steps, his gloved hands clasped neatly behind his back, his eyes darting to every detail, searching, comparing, arranging. "You see, Inspector," he said softly, "in the silence of the morning, the truth speaks louder. The arrangements of the crime are too precise, and precision, it leaves behind not chaos, but the smallest of echoes." He bent toward the reliquary, examining the velvet. The nap of the fabric is disturbed in a single direction. From left to right, someone slid a hand beneath, careful but not perfect. What did they seek? Perhaps to suggest theft, or perhaps to plant suspicion, yet nothing is missing. Graves shifted, his voice low. Or they sought to confirm the relic's authenticity themselves. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Très juste, but the one who disturbs without removing has another object. They wish to confuse the eye, to distract from the true business. The murder." He pointed toward the taper that had burned shorter than the others. "And here we have haste. One candle shortened so that at the height of the ceremony it would die sooner, leaving that corner darker. Enough shadow for a hand to act unseen." He straightened and regarded the transept where Stanhope had fallen. The scarf remained in its evidence cloth, the knot as he had found it. Poirot leaned closer, his fingers hovering. "It is drawn beneath the jaw, from behind and to the right. The one who strangled him knew how to avoid the clumsy struggle. It is methodical, not the work of passion." He tapped a finger lightly in the air. "And, Inspector, note this, the smear. It is not blood, it is wax." Graves started. "Wax?" Poirot nodded. "From a candle touched before or after the act. Wax on the scarf, wax near the reliquary, the candle shortened. All the small things, they join hands, Inspector. They tell me of someone who meddled with more than one object. And who is it who meddles always with objects, who adjusts, who preserves?" His mustaches twitched. "The conservator, Dr. Havers." Graves' eyes narrowed. "That's an accusation." Poirot lifted a hand. "No, not yet. It is a possibility. We must not leap. To leap is for the English police, eh? For Poirot, there is only the step-by-step, the order." They left the chapel and moved into the cloister, where the suspects had gathered again under the constable's watch. The pale light of morning cast their faces into harsher lines. Julian pale and irritable, Miss Whitby clutching her notebook as if it shielded her, Sir Roderick proud and stiff, Dr. Havers composed but tense, Mrs. Crowe wan and silent, Penfold the verger, weary with guilt. Lady Agatha presided still, her dark attire more severe than the stone about her. Poirot stepped before them, his presence commanding without force. "Mes amis, the night has been long. Yet already the dawn begins to dispel the fog of confusion. I ask only patience a little longer. There are questions that must be answered. One of you has killed, and one of you alone." His gaze fell upon Miss Whitby. "Mademoiselle, your pencil you dropped. Did you recover it?" She faltered. "No, I could not find it in the confusion." Poirot smiled faintly. "Curious, a pencil dropped and yet gone. Where does it go? Unless someone picked it up. A small thing, but small things, they are the clue." He turned to Sir Roderick. "You, monsieur, are affronted by Stanhope's accusations. You would not stoop to violence, you say, yet you had knowledge of the missing key. Did you not think to tell the inspector at once?" Sir Roderick's jaw tightened. "I considered it unimportant." "Ah, but nothing is unimportant," Poirot said softly. "The missing key, the disturbed velvet, the candle stub, all speak of premeditation, and premeditation is the true face of this crime." Julian broke in hotly. "You mean to say one of us planned this like a scholar plans a paper? That's absurd." Poirot regarded him with gentle pity. "No, monsieur, it is not absurd. It is necessary. This was not murder in fury. It was murder arranged to fall like a curtain at the precise moment. Ask yourself, who among you has the nature to set every piece in its place? Who cannot bear disorder? His eyes rested on Dr. Havers, who met his gaze with defiance. You suspect me because I'm orderly. That is hardly evidence. Poirot inclined his head. Evidence, non. Suspicion, oui. But the evidence, it will show itself. For instance, the scarf bears wax. And you, madame, you moved among the candles, did you not? You inspected the stands in the north aisle. Her lips pressed thin. I did. But that proves nothing. Poirot's expression softened. Perhaps. Perhaps not. But there is more. This morning, before coming here, I made inquiries. Mademoiselle Whitby, your notebook with its dates. 2 versions of the same inscription, confused. You told us Stanhope mocked you for it. Yet why 2 versions? Because you were shown 2 parchments, the authentic and the copy. Only one here had both in hand. The conservator, Dr. Havers. A stir ran through the group. Dr. Havers' face grew pale, but she said nothing. Poirot raised a finger. Do not mistake me. I do not yet accuse. But we approach the truth. The reliquary was tampered with to draw suspicion away, the candle shortened to create shadow, the scarf tightened with calm precision. These acts speak of knowledge, of planning, of discipline. They speak not of impulse, but of control, Jules. Lady Agatha's voice rang out, sharp. Then we must know at once. If Dr. Havers is guilty, let it be declared. Poirot turned, his expression serene. Patience, madame. Not yet. The picture is nearly complete, but one stroke is missing. I shall assemble all in the chapel tonight when darkness falls again. Then the truth will stand revealed. The company shifted, fear and dread mingling with anticipation. Poirot clasped his hands, his mustaches gleaming in the cold light. For now, mes amis, reflect well. In the silence of your thoughts, the truth weighs heavy. By tonight, there will be no more shadows in the candlelit chapel. The day at the Abbey passed under a peculiar strain, the suspects held within its walls as though the ancient stones themselves had become prison bars. Constables kept a discreet watch, while Inspector Graves busied himself with practical measures, sending messages and receiving reports, his heavy tread sounding through the cloisters. Yet it was Poirot who moved with quiet purpose, speaking little, his eyes alight with some inward certainty. He walked the chapel again and again, pausing at the reliquary, the transept, the guttered candles, his head inclined as if listening to voices only he could hear. By late afternoon, the mist thickened, and a bitter wind pressed at the stained-glass windows, rattling them faintly. The suspects were gathered in the refectory, given food but little appetite. Miss Whitby scribbled distracted notes she scarcely read. Julian paced the length of the chamber with his hands clenched behind him. Sir Roderick held forth in muttered tones about injustice. Mrs. Crowe clutched her prayer book, lips moving silently. Dr. Havers sat rigid, her face expressionless, though every so often her gaze flicked toward the door as if measuring escape. At 6, Poirot entered, his step light, his manner composed, and he inclined his head with courtesy. Mes amis, I thank you for your patience. Tonight we shall have order. But before we gather in the chapel, I must ask one more question, small yet of importance. Monsieur Penfold, you spoke of the sacristy key returned this morning. Tell me, where exactly did you find it? The verger blinked, surprised. Hanging on its nail, sir, as if it had never been gone. But the dust upon the nail was brushed, I swear it. Poirot nodded gravely. Ah, a key that returns itself. It is like the criminal who believes he can erase his steps. But the dust, it betrays him. Always the little things. They moved together into the chapel, where the constables had lit fresh candles. Their glow warmed the stone, but cast shadows that wavered restlessly in the draught. Poirot stood before the reliquary, his small figure framed by the shimmer of flames. "This place, it has been desecrated," he began softly, "not only by murder, but by deception. A reliquary disturbed, a scarf knotted with precision, a candle shortened, a key mislaid and returned. Each act by itself, it may be explained. Together they sing the song of calculation. The murderer, he is not the one who loses his head. Non, he is the one who seeks to control every detail." He let his words sink in, his eyes moving across each face. The silence deepened until only the faint crackle of wax could be heard. Poirot continued, "Last night, Mademoiselle Whitby, you saw the shoes. Polished, dark, moving quickly at the moment of the crime. This morning, I observed. Sir Roderick, your shoes are scuffed from the gravel outside. Julian, yours bear mud at the edge. Inspector Graves can confirm. But one pair alone remains immaculate, those of Dr. Havers. And why? Because she remained within, moving swiftly across stone where no mud betrays her." A murmur rippled through the group. Dr. Havers' lips parted, then closed. Poirot raised his hand gently. "No, let me finish. The wax upon the scarf, it is most telling. Who but she moved among the candles, adjusting them, pretending to inspect? She had the chance to shorten one, to let it die sooner. She alone had reason to create shadow near the transept. And the reliquary, it is a conservator's hand that slides beneath the velvet, not clumsily, but with knowledge of how to leave a trace of disturbance, enough to suggest another motive, a trick, an artifice." Dr. Havers's voice cut in, sharp. "You build theories from trifles. I examined the reliquary because it is my task. I touched the candles because they were uneven. These are not proofs." "Yet proofs they become," Poirot said, his tone firm, "because of the psychology. Stanhope threatened all, yes, but whom did he most imperil? The scholar. He mocked her notes, but she is young, unknown. The collector. He would sue, confident in wealth. The nephew, hot-headed but clumsy. The organist, nervous, timid. But you, madame, you had most to lose. Your reputation as a conservator rests upon authenticity. If the parchment was proved false, your career ended in shame. Stanhope had the power to destroy you, and you had the temperament to plan carefully, to preserve your own standing as you would a manuscript. You killed not in anger, but in defense of order." The stillness was absolute. Poirot turned toward Inspector Graves. "There is more. This morning I examined Stanhope's pocket. Within, a fragment of fine thread was caught, a thread of cotton used to bind the parchment during treatment. It is of the same type employed in Dr. Havers's laboratory. A souvenir he carried from his earlier quarrel with her, or proof that she handled the scarf." He spread his hands. "The connection is clear." Dr. Havers rose abruptly, her chair scraping. "You cannot prove it." Her voice rang high, breaking the hush. "Yes, he threatened me. Yes, I feared him, but I did not." She stopped, her chest heaving. "I only meant to silence him, not to kill." Her words fell like a stone into the silence. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Yet silence it became. The knot, it was too tight, and so the man died. Constables stepped forward as Graves barked a command. Dr. Havers's defiance faltered, replaced by a bitter collapse of composure. Lady Agatha rose, her face stern, eyes glittering with grim satisfaction. Julian gave a strangled gasp, while Miss Whitby covered her mouth. Poirot, immaculate as ever, adjusted his cuffs. "So you see, mes amis, order is restored. The truth, it cannot remain hidden beneath shadows. In every crime, as in every relic, authenticity prevails." The candles flickered higher, and the chapel seemed to exhale, as though relieved to surrender its secret at last. Yet in Poirot's eyes there lingered no triumph, only the weary recognition of what human frailty may drive one to conceal and to destroy. The sound of Dr. Havers's protest still seemed to hang in the vaulted air long after she had been led away by the constables. The chapel, with its flickering candles and hushed atmosphere, felt suddenly bereft, as though the building itself recoiled from the violence revealed within its walls. Lady Agatha's expression remained rigid, her lips pressed tight in a mask of triumph mixed with disdain. Julian, pale and unsettled, avoided her gaze, while Sir Roderick muttered something inaudible under his breath. Miss Whitby clutched her notebook so tightly the edges crumpled. Mrs. Crow's trembling hands closed over her prayer book with a fervor that seemed both relief and fear. Poirot, however, stood very still in the center of the chapel, his eyes half closed as though in meditation. When he spoke, it was with the calm authority of one who arranges pieces upon a board. The criminal has been unmasked, yet the duty of justice is not concluded. There remain details that must be understood, for without them the picture is not complete. A confession blurted in fear, it is not enough. One must see the crime as it was lived, moment by moment. Inspector Graves, his jaw set with satisfaction, nodded. She's admitted enough. The charge will stand. Motive, method, opportunity, clear as day. Poirot's eyes flickered toward him. Ah, but clarity, my dear Inspector, is too often an illusion. One must polish the glass until no smudge remains. Let us retrace the crime. He moved toward the transept, where Stanhope had fallen. His small figure bent over the flagged stones, hands folded behind his back. Picture the moment. The reliquary unveiled, Lady Agatha lifting her hand to command silence. The bell tolls. In the shadow, Edward Stanhope steps aside, the silk scarf still loose about his neck. He intends to interrupt, perhaps with the letter hidden in his pocket. But a figure moves quickly, unseen by most, across the aisle. Miss Whitby notices only the polished shoes. In the dying glow of the shortened taper, the scarf is seized, pulled tight with exactitude. Not a blow, not a struggle, only one swift tightening, practiced and controlled. Then silence, broken by the scream. Miss Whitby shivered visibly. Poirot's gaze turned to her with gentleness. You are not mistaken, mademoiselle. Your eyes recorded what others missed. Without you, the pattern would lack its line. She colored faintly, lowering her eyes. Poirot continued, Now, the reliquary. Why was it disturbed? Because Dr. Havers wished to suggest another motive, to scatter suspicion among rivals and collectors. A conservator knows the weight of perception. The reliquary is sacred, yet she touched it, deliberately careless, so that later it would be said, perhaps Stanhope died to protect a secret of forgery. A clever misdirection. Lady Agatha's voice rang out coldly. It seems she wished to destroy us all, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Not destroy, madame. Preserve herself. In this, she is not so different from you, who would preserve the name of your family against any whisper of doubt. The difference lies only in the method chosen. A silence followed, taut and heavy, broken only by the faint draught rattling the candle flames. Poirot drew himself upright, his hands smoothing the line of his moustaches. And the candle, that is the true stroke of artistry, to shorten it in advance, so that it burns lower, its light dying before the others. Darkness, at just the right moment. This required foresight, precision, patience, and it is this precision which betrayed her. For crime, when planned to perfection, often exposes the very mind that sought to conceal it. Inspector Graves shifted. Then it settled. Havers will face trial, and the rest of us can be done with this cursed place. Poirot's eyes rested on him for a moment, unreadable. Yes, Inspector, the hand that killed is revealed, but there is still something more. Always there is more. Consider the letter in Stanhope's pocket. He meant to expose not only Dr. Havers, but perhaps others. Why carry it upon him into the chapel unless he was certain he would be believed? He had reason to think his proof unassailable. And yet, he did not live to speak it. Julian spoke suddenly, his voice hoarse. "You mean there was truth in it? That the parchment really is false?" The words fell like a stone in water. Lady Agatha turned sharply, her eyes flashing with outrage. "No, I will not hear it. The relic is genuine. My family's honor, our history, it rests upon it." Poirot lifted a hand. "Madame, calm yourself. I do not declare the parchment false. I merely state what must be considered. The murderer believed Stanhope's claim dangerous enough to kill for. Whether his claim was truth or lie, it gave him power, and power in the wrong hands is fatal." The candles guttered again, and the shadows thickened in the chapel's corners. Poirot drew his coat closer. "We shall not linger. The constables will remove the body tonight. Tomorrow, Inspector, you must take Dr. Havers into custody. But tonight, let us keep vigil not over relics, nor reputations, but over truth itself. For truth, it is delicate, yet stronger than stone. It bends beneath lies, but it does not break." He turned toward the door, and the company followed in uneasy silence, their footsteps echoing against the stone. Behind them the reliquary gleamed faintly in the candlelight, untouchable and inscrutable, as though mocking both faith and deceit alike. Poirot paused only once, glancing back with eyes narrowed, before stepping out into the cold night where the mist lay heavy. And though justice had found its mark, a shadow still lingered in Poirot's mind, a subtle disquiet that whispered of threads not yet fully untangled, of motives that might run deeper than a single act of desperation. He said nothing, only pulled his coat tight and allowed the night air to carry him forward, his thoughts restless, his little grey cells not yet still. The mist clung heavier still the following morning, veiling the abbey grounds in a damp silence that seemed reluctant to yield to daylight. The constables had departed with Dr. Havers under guard, her composure broken but her lips sealed to further explanation. Yet Poirot rose early, as was his habit, and took his breakfast alone with quiet deliberation. His eyes, watchful and contemplative, revealed none of the certainty Inspector Graves had expressed after the arrest. Indeed, Poirot's expression betrayed a peculiar restlessness, as though some thread of the tapestry remained frayed, refusing to be woven into harmony. He returned to the chapel at first light, the great door opening with a groan, the air within cool and faintly scented of extinguished wax. The reliquary still occupied its pedestal, the velvet smoothed by careful constables, though its presence seemed heavier than before, as though aware of the burden of suspicion it carried. Poirot paced the nave slowly, his patent leather shoes glinting in the dim light. Each step echoed softly, measured, a metronome of thought. He examined once again the row of candles, noting the fresh stubs of the night's replacements. He paused where the taper had guttered too soon, running his finger along the iron sconce, then kneeling briefly to inspect the stone beneath. He found a faint fleck of wax hardened upon the floor, evidence overlooked in the chaos. Pocketing it carefully, he straightened with a small sigh of satisfaction. Inspector Graves entered shortly after, his manner brisk, his features set with the resolve of one who considers the matter concluded. "I've sent word to the Crown Prosecutor," he said. "The evidence is more than sufficient. She'll stand trial, and the relic will remain untouched until inquiry concludes." Poirot inclined his head. "You are confident, mon cher. Yet I am not so content. A confession made in anger, it does not soothe the conscience of Hercule Poirot. There remain the questions unanswered. Why, for example, the disturbance of the reliquary at all, if the motive was purely to silence Stanhope? Why the key returned so carefully to its nail? And above all, what of the letter in his pocket? If his accusation was false, it served no purpose but to anger. If true, then another had reason, perhaps more reason than Dr. Havers, to see him silenced." Graves frowned, folding his arms. "You think she isn't guilty after all?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No, Inspector. She's guilty, Yes, she killed him with her own hands, but I suspect she did not act alone. There is a second hand in this, not in the act but in the motive. Someone stood behind her, perhaps unseen, perhaps whispering, guiding, and that is the matter that troubles me." They were interrupted by Julian, who entered with disheveled hair and a face lined from sleeplessness. He looked from Poirot to Graves, his voice unsteady. "Monsieur Poirot, may I speak with you privately?" Poirot inclined his head, and together they moved into the cloister where the morning air pressed damp against the stone. Julian's voice shook as he spoke. "I cannot bear it. I told you I was furious with Stanhope. But there is more. He threatened not only to expose my aunt's relic as a forgery, but to reveal debts, my debts. He had discovered wages I made, foolish and reckless. He meant to ruin me as well. I swear I did not touch him, but when you spoke last night of the letter, I realized he held more power over me than I confessed." Poirot regarded him with grave sympathy. "You see, my young friend, why I'm not at rest. Stanhope played his game with many pieces, moving them all at once. And when such a man is silenced, one must ask, whose secret was most dangerous? Yours? Lady Agatha's? Sir Roderick's? Or the conservator's?" Dr. Havers struck the blow, yes, but who placed the weapon in her hand? Julian covered his face briefly, then whispered, "You think she was encouraged?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Encouraged, perhaps. Or manipulated. The psychology is delicate. She feared for her career. But what if someone reminded her of that fear, pressed it at the right moment, offered her a means to preserve herself? Then the act becomes not merely hers, but shared." They were interrupted by Lady Agatha herself, her figure tall and imperious against the fog. "Monsieur Poirot," she said sharply, "this speculation must cease. Dr. Havers is guilty. Let her bear the consequences. My family's name must not be dragged through any further mud." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained calm. "Madame, I respect your desire for closure. Yet truth, it cannot be hurried. Your family name, your honor, it will be safeguarded only when the whole picture is seen, without shadow. I beg you patience." Her lips tightened, but she turned away without reply. Poirot watched her go, then turned to Julian, who looked pale and troubled. "Courage, monsieur. The truth, it comes slowly, like the dawn through the mist. We must allow it to break fully before we can rest." When Poirot re-entered the chapel alone, he stood once more before the reliquary. He bent low, peering at the join of its base, and there his keen eyes caught a trace of something new, a faint indentation, as if the velvet had been pressed by a small, sharp object. He touched it delicately, frowning. "It is as I thought," he murmured to himself. "There is still a hand unseen, a motive unspoken. The affair is not yet finished." The candles flickered in their sconces, casting wavering shadows that seemed to lean in closer, as though the chapel itself conspired to listen. Poirot straightened, his gaze bright with determination, and whispered softly, "Patience, mes amis. Soon the final piece shall be revealed." Poirot lingered by the reliquary long after the others had dispersed, his gaze fixed on the small indentation in the velvet. He bent once more, his eyes narrowing as he traced the faint depression with the tip of his finger. It was too deliberate to be accident, too sharp to be caused by a mere hand sliding beneath. The shape suggested something narrow, pointed and metallic, as though a tool had pressed against the cloth. He straightened slowly, the lines of his forehead drawn tight, and whispered, "Mais oui, it is the mark of intention, not clumsiness." Inspector Graves returned, his boots loud on the stone. "You're still at it, Poirot? I tell you, the case is done. Wax on the scarf, the candle, her own admission, it all fits. What more could you need?" Poirot raised his brows, smoothing his mustaches. "You see only what shouts, Inspector. I listen to what whispers, Why disturb the reliquary at all? Why leave an impression of a tool? To what end? If Dr. Havers wished to conceal, she would smooth, not mark. No, someone else sought to use her fear as the cloak for their own design. Graves gave a grunt. You think we've another criminal hiding in plain sight? Poirot inclined his head gravely. Exactement. Stanhope died by her hands, yes, but perhaps at another's prompting. Consider the letter. It claimed the parchment a forgery. If true, then exposure would shame not only Dr. Havers, but also Lady Agatha, whose name rests upon the relic. If false, then Stanhope risked his credibility. But tell me, Inspector, how did Stanhope acquire such confidence in his accusation? He had not the training of a conservator. Someone must have supplied him with knowledge or with documents to appear as proof. Graves frowned. Then he had an accomplice. Not accomplice, mon cher, but source. One among these very guests gave him the weapon of information, perhaps expecting him to use it. And when he threatened, they realized too late that the blow might fall upon them as well. Poirot paused, his eyes glinting. So they guided Dr. Havers, pressed her, whispered until her fear became action. And she, poor woman, believed she acted for herself, not knowing she was also preserving another's secret. Their conversation was interrupted by the hurried arrival of Miss Whitby, pale and breathless. She clutched her notebook to her chest, her hands trembling. Monsieur Poirot, I found something. I thought it unimportant last night, but now I could not keep it. She held out a folded slip of paper, yellowed and creased. Poirot took it delicately, opening it with care. It was a torn fragment, written in Stanhope's hand, evidently ripped from a larger sheet. The words were hurried, the copy kept by R himself. If revealed, Lady A ruined. To demand terms tomorrow at unveiling. Must press advantage. Poirot's eyes sharpened as he read. He turned the fragment so Graves could see. You observe? The letter suggests Stanhope knew of a copy kept by R. Himself. R. Who else but Sir Roderick Vale? Miss Whitby's voice faltered. I found it under the pew where I dropped my pencil. It must have slipped from his papers during the struggle. Poirot gave her a look of approval. Mademoiselle, your eyes and your honesty are of the greatest service. You have given us the missing thread. Graves muttered an oath. So Roderick planted the idea, fed Stanhope enough to provoke him, and when the quarrel threatened to spill back on him, he let Havers bear the weight. Poirot nodded slowly. Just so. He, the collector, proud and vain, could not afford scandal. If his chalice was denounced as false, his reputation would crumble. So he pointed Stanhope toward the reliquary, gave him reason to cry forgery, knowing it would wound Lady Agatha, perhaps even force her to sell or withdraw. But he underestimated the consequences. He thought only of himself, not of how Stanhope's threats would drive Havers to desperate action. At that moment, Sir Roderick himself entered the chapel, his cane tapping the stones, his face stern. He halted when he saw Poirot with the fragment. You pry too far, monsieur. Poirot raised the slip of paper delicately. On the contrary, I pry just enough. You gave Stanhope the means to blackmail, hoping to rid yourself of a rival and protect your own collection. But when the affair turned to murder, you sat silent, content to see suspicion fall elsewhere. You are not the killer, Sir Roderick, but you are the hand that loaded the pistol, even if another pulled the trigger. Roderick's face flushed dark. You've no proof beyond a torn note. Poirot's gaze held his, calm and implacable. Proof enough to show motive, to show your whisper in the dark that set events into motion. The court may try only Dr. Havers for murder, but your conscience, monsieur, will stand in its own dock forever. You played with fire, and another burned for it. For a long moment, the silence was suffocating. Then Roderick turned sharply on his heel and strode from the chapel, his footsteps echoing like blows upon the stone. Graves muttered, You'll not see him confess, Poirot. He's too proud. Poirot sighed, smoothing his mustache. Confession is not always the goal, Inspector. Truth, it is enough. We know the whole. Now, the hand that killed, and the hand that set it in motion. Justice is imperfect, but order, it has been restored. He turned back to the reliquary, his eyes thoughtful. The candles flickered, and the velvet gleamed faintly where the indentation remained. Poirot whispered almost to himself, "Even the most ancient of relics hide secrets beneath the surface. But secrets, they cannot resist forever the little grey cells." The heavy doors of the chapel closed on Sir Roderick's retreating figure, the echo of his footsteps still resounding when Poirot and Inspector Graves remained within, their shadows stretching long in the candlelight. The fragment of Stanhope's note lay on the pedestal beside the reliquary, fragile yet damning in its implications. Poirot regarded it with a contemplative air, his fingers resting lightly on the folded edge as though it were both proof and symbol. "You see, Inspector," he said softly, "there are crimes of the hand, and there are crimes of the mind. Dr. Havers, she committed the one, but Sir Roderick, he is guilty of the other. Without his whisper, Stanhope would have had no weapon with which to strike. The murder was born of fear, but the seed was planted by pride." Graves shifted uncomfortably, unused to a justice that could not be bound in handcuffs. "The courts will not care for seeds or whispers. They'll hang her if they can, and he will walk free." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Perhaps, but he will not walk free in his heart. Conscience, it is the crueler jailer." Their words were interrupted by the arrival of Lady Agatha, her figure stern in the archway. She advanced with deliberate steps, her gaze resting first on Poirot, then on the reliquary. "I have heard enough," she declared, her voice clipped. "My family's name has been dragged through shame. The relic is spoken of as forgery. My guests whisper of scandal, and blood has stained the very stones. Tell me, Monsieur Poirot, is my abbey cursed, or is it merely the folly of men that has brought us to this?" Poirot bowed slightly, his expression touched with pity. "Madame, it is always the folly of men, and of women too. Curses, they are but shadows we cast upon ourselves. The parchment, whether true or false, is less weighty than the actions it provoked. The relic did not kill. It merely drew forth the truths men wished to conceal." Julian appeared behind his aunt, his face drawn but earnest. "Then there is hope still? If the parchment can be authenticated, if Dr. Havers's work was sound, perhaps this can be mended." Poirot looked at him with steady eyes. "Hope, yes. But first you must face the possibility that the relic is not as it seems. If it is true, then rejoice. If it is false, then live with honesty. Better an uncomfortable truth than a comforting lie that destroys." Lady Agatha's lips tightened, yet she did not reply. She turned her gaze toward the reliquary, her expression caught between pride and doubt. Poirot studied her in silence before turning back to Graves. "Inspector, you must take possession of both the parchment and the letter fragment. They belong now to the inquiry, and when the matter is settled, perhaps there will be peace here again." Graves nodded curtly and set about the task. Poirot remained still, his gaze lingering on the reliquary. A faint tremor in the candle flames drew his attention upward to the stained glass, where the morning light struggled to pierce the mist. The chapel felt less oppressive now, though the echoes of its recent violence still lingered. Later that evening, the company gathered once more in the refectory at Lady Agatha's insistence. The air was heavy with fatigue, yet no one dared depart before Poirot himself declared the affair closed. He stood at the head of the long table, his hands folded neatly before him. His eyes moved from face to face. Lady Agatha, resolute and wounded. Julian, pale but steadier. Miss Whitby, anxious yet attentive. Mrs. Crowe, whispering her prayers. Sir Roderick, absent but unforgotten. "My friends," Poirot began, his voice gentle yet firm, "the matter of the murder is resolved. Dr. Havers will face her judgment and the law will decide her fate. But we must not deceive ourselves into thinking that only she bears blame. Each of you has played some part. The threats of Stanhope, the ambitions of Sir Roderick, the fears and silences of others, they all wove the web in which he was caught and killed. Murder, it is rarely the act of one alone. It is the fruit of many hidden roots. He paused, allowing his words to settle. No one spoke. Poirot's gaze rested finally on Lady Agatha. And you, madame, you must decide. The parchment may be true, it may be false. Either way, its power is broken. If you would restore the Abbey's honor, it will not be through relics, but through truth. Let the scholars test it openly, without concealment, and accept what they find. In honesty lies dignity. For the first time, Lady Agatha's composure faltered. Her eyes softened, and she inclined her head, a gesture both regal and weary. Perhaps you are right, Monsieur Poirot. If the Abbey is to stand another century, it must stand on truth. Poirot bowed slightly, satisfied. Then order is restored, not only to the law, but to the heart. For me, it is enough. As the gathering dispersed, Poirot stepped outside into the night air. The mist had lifted at last, and the stars glimmered faintly above the Abbey towers. He drew his coat close, breathing deeply of the cold. His mustaches twitched with the faintest smile. Always, he murmured to himself, it is the little things that bring us to the great truths. The bells tolled softly from the tower, not with menace now, but with calm. The Abbey, cleansed of its shadows, seemed to settle into silence once more. Poirot turned toward the waiting carriage, his step precise, his figure small against the looming stone, carrying with him the quiet triumph of order restored, and the eternal burden of knowing how fragile such order always is. The following day dawned with a clarity the Abbey had not seen since the affair began. The mist had gone, swept away by a brisk wind, leaving the sky a pale, cold blue. The stones of Linton Abbey glowed in the thin sunlight, as though relieved of a burden. Within, however, the air was still heavy with memory. The reliquary had been removed under Inspector Graves' orders, sealed for examination. The guests, one by one, had been allowed to leave. Only Lady Agatha, Julian, and Miss Whitby remained to take their leave of Poirot, who prepared to depart. They met in the cloister, where the light fell gently through the arches. Lady Agatha stood straight, though her face bore the strain of sleepless hours. Julian lingered beside her, subdued, while Miss Whitby clutched her notebook with nervous respect. Poirot, immaculate as ever, addressed them with the quiet composure of a man who has done what was required, though not without sorrow. "Mes amis," he began, "the work of Hercule Poirot is never to rejoice at tragedy, but to restore order where chaos has intruded. And here the order is restored. Yet it is an order tinged with sadness. Edward Stanhope lies dead. Dr. Havers faces justice, and Sir Roderick Vale must carry the secret guilt of his manipulation. Such is the balance. Each pays a price." Lady Agatha inclined her head. "It is not triumph, monsieur, but at least it is an end. My abbey may yet survive, even if its relic does not." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Ah, but you are wrong, madame. It is not the relic that matters, but the truth. Should the parchment prove genuine, then rejoice, for your family's honor is secured. Should it prove false, then let the abbey stand not as a monument to legend, but as a place of sincerity. For truth, it is more enduring than illusion." Julian spoke, his voice low but steady. "I will see to it, Monsieur Poirot. I will not repeat the mistakes that brought us here. If I inherit, it must be with honesty." Poirot gave a small nod of approval. "Très bien. It is in the young that hope resides, if only they are willing to learn." His eyes turned then to Miss Whitby. "And you, mademoiselle, you have shown courage. You observed what others missed. Do not doubt yourself again. A scholar who records faithfully, even when uncertain, serves truth more than one who writes boldly with error." Her eyes widened, and she murmured, "Thank you, monsieur." Poirot clasped his hands together. And now, mes amis, it is time I take my leave. The little grey cells, they may rest at last. They walked with him to the gates where the carriage waited. Lady Agatha, ever regal, offered her hand in farewell. Monsieur Poirot, you have brought clarity where darkness threatened. My gratitude is beyond words. Poirot bowed, his eyes soft with understanding. Madame, guard not your name, but your truth. It will serve you better. With that, he climbed into the carriage. As it rolled away down the frost-hardened road, Poirot leaned back, folding his hands. The abbey towers dwindled behind him, their spires rising into the pale sky. He reflected, as he often did, not with triumph, but with a quiet melancholy, on the frailty of human hearts, the pride, the fear, the ambition that drive men and women to folly. The case was closed, yet the echo of it would linger in memory. The flickering candles, the reliquary disturbed, the scarf drawn tight, the lies and truths entwined like ivy around the abbey's stones. Poirot allowed himself a faint smile. Always, he murmured. It is the psychology that reveals the crime. The relics of the past, they may deceive. But the human soul, it betrays itself unfailingly. The wheels clattered over the stones, carrying him away into the clear morning. Order, for now, was restored, and Hercule Poirot, ever precise, ever patient, moved on with the serenity of one who knows the struggle against human folly is endless, yet always worth the effort.